What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to be replacing the brake rotors and calipers and pads on this 2003 Toyota Camry. First thing you need to do is jack the wheel off the ground. If you don't have an impact, make sure you break the lug nuts loose first before lifting the tire off the ground. Alright, now you can see the problem we're having here, which is this rotor is really pitted and it doesn't have a shiny surface on it, which indicates to me that this brake pad isn't pressing against this disc. And the reason for that is probably because this caliper is seized, and so it's only pushing the back pad against the rotor, and this front one is literally just sitting here doing nothing. So we're gonna take it all apart and replace it. The first thing to do while everything's still tight is to undo the brake hose, because once you get this off, trying to undo that if you don't have an impact is hard to hold it in place and break that bolt loose. If yours is all rusted like mine, set your socket on it and make sure to hammer it down so it fully seats. You don't want to risk stripping out the hex. There we go. Broke loose enough for us to work with, so we'll go ahead and proceed. Now we're going to remove the two bolts that hold the caliper on. These are both 14mm. Just going to break them loose, and then I'll use the ratchet to get them out the rest of the way. This one was super tight, so it was probably locked in there, making this caliper seized. But we've got them both loose now, so go ahead and remove them and pull the caliper off. This bolt is stuck in here really good, so I took the pads out, and I'm just going to go ahead and flip this up. I'm going to hammer this caliper to drive it out, since I'm going to be replacing it anyway. Got it out. You can see how it's all rusted. There's no lubrication on that pin, and so that caliper was not able to freely move back and forth to sandwich those pads. Now we can go ahead and remove the banjo bolt to the brake hose. Now we're going to remove this and that 14mm bolts, and then that'll take the bracket off. Alright, those bolts are out, and then the rotor should just slide right off. Here you can see what I was talking about, how this side's shiny. This side's all pitted and barely shiny, so that caliper was seized, and so it wasn't able to sandwich. It was that piston was just pushing the one pad into this rotor, which is probably like less than half of your braking power on a wheel. So we should get a good performance increase doing this repair. When we go to put the new rotor on, we want to make sure that this mounting surface is flat, because if it's not and a piece of debris or something's underneath it, it'll cock that rotor just a hair, and it'll cause vibrations when braking, the brake pedal, the pulse, stuff like that. So I'm going to take a wire brush and just get in here and brush off all this debris. And then while I'm here and I got the wheel off, I'm going to check to make sure this hub bearing isn't bad. And it feels solid. There's zero play, so we're good to proceed. Here's our new rotor. Go ahead and throw it on there. There we go. Make sure you've got the right rotor. There are two different sizes for these cars. In my case, it's a 10.5-inch rotor, and it's a it's a USA made Toyota. So looks like there's Japan made and USA made cars that affects the kind of brake pads you have or the rotor size you have. So with that on, now we can go ahead and put the new caliper on. in my kit here, I've got new hardware, new copper washers for the banjo bolt, and then a new bracket and caliper. Now what I'm going to do before I install this is make sure it's the correct part. I want to compare everything. Make sure that, you know, the bleed screws are in this right spot. You know, back here on this hose fitting, there's a little hole right here to clock the brake hose in the proper position. And here you can see we've got the same thing on the old one. And then we can compare our brackets. You can see that our brackets are pretty much perfectly identical. And then the other thing you want to make sure is that when you go to install this, the bleed screw is on the top. So when I go to put this on, it's going to sit like that. And you can see how the bleed screw is on the top. If you ever go to install it and for some reason it's on the bottom, then you've got the wrong side, because that bleed screw always is on the top side of this caliper. The reason for that is if it's on the bottom, air bubbles can get trapped up in here when you're trying to bleed it out, and you'll never be able to bleed it out properly because they're trapped up here. But if it's on the top like this, all the air goes up and out the port. Install is pretty much the same. Just put the new bracket in place, install the old bolts, and tighten everything down. All right, we're ready to put the caliper on. I'm coating my bolts in Permatex brake parts lubricant. You don't want to use regular grease or anything like anise or stuff like that. It's just not what it's designed for. And then I'm not greasing the threads, just the pin. All right, I've got that pin just in for now so that we can install our brake pads. You can see the kit came with new hardware. So these are just gonna go in the bracket like this to kind of snap in just like that. You do it for both sides. There we go. All right, we've got our new pads. I'm gonna grease these up too. Got this greased. You can see I just put it on those contact areas on the lug. There's no need to go overboard. And then when installing, just put one down in there and then the other one will snap in place like that. Do the same for the other side. Here we go, new pads are in. And then we'll take this caliper, kind of center it, and then lower it down. And now we can install the other pin. According to the factory service manual, the pin with the rubber bushing goes on the bottom. I'm not exactly sure what its purpose is and why it's there, but we'll just do what it says. Everything's installed, everything's torqued down. Now all that's left is reconnecting the brake hose, replacing these copper washers. I cleaned the banjo bolt up with a wire brush and brake parts cleaner. Now we're going to take one of those copper crush washers and install it on the head side, and then we'll feed it through the banjo, and then we're going to take the other crush washer and put it through the other side. There we go, just like that. Don't forget to remove your plastic plug, and then we'll take it, line it up, start the threads, and then that hole I was talking about earlier, you want this kind of elbow to go into that hole. It positions the hose properly. All right, once we're snug down, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it. Now before I put the tire on, we're gonna go ahead and bleed the air out of that caliper. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the cover for this service port. And I'm gonna hit the brake pedal a few times so that the caliper fully extends as much as it can. And then to bleed the air out, I've got this breaker bar that I'm gonna put against the brake pedal and then use the seat to push it against the floor, and that will build up pressure in the brake line so I can bleed them. Go apply some more pressure. And then while we're doing this process, we want to make sure that the banjo bolt's sealing properly. There's no leaks. Alright, there you can see there's no more air in the system. And we are done. One last thing I'm going to do before I put the tire on is wash down all this brake fluid, just so that everything's clean, even though it's all rusty. Don't forget to replace the cover on your bleeder like I almost did. And there you have it, guys. Do it right or do it twice. Just do the same on the other side. It's pretty much just mirrored. I'd like to get this thing to 300,000 miles. No check engine light, no nothing. Original engine, original transmission.